much for coming. I have been teaching the Clarion workshop for the past week and a half. All these delightful people behind me. And I've been totally exhausted and completely forgot to even post about the fact that I was doing the signing. So I was honestly like, well, I guess nobody will show up, but that'll be fine. So thank you all for being diligent enough to come. I had originally wanted to read from Clockwork Princess, but I did that at an earlier signing, and my publisher found out about it and chewed me out for half a day. So we're doing not that too. So yeah. I asked all the people, you know, all the readers. I was like, could you put your phones down and everything. Don't record. Don't put it on YouTube, but I'll read for you. They were all perfect. I got busted by the Huffington Post. So I was like, my fans are awesome. Huffington Post are behind a post tab. So I decided instead to give you your choice of some cut excerpted scenes that didn't make it into the books, or in one case, a scene that's written from a different point of view. So I have, they're both short pieces. One is about why Will is afraid of ducks. His deep, dark secret. And the other one is Clary and Jace's first kiss from Jace's point of view. Alright, sounds like you want that one. Less ducks, more gossip. Probably do both. Let's see. Alright, this takes place in City of Bones. So this was kind of fun to write because I wrote City of Bones back in 2004, so it's been a long time since I kind of revisited that period in Clary and Jace's relationship. It was kind of fun to get back in Jace's head in what feels like a really long time ago, even though for the characters it actually hasn't been that long, but they've changed a lot. So they're up in the greenhouse in the Institute, and Jace has brought sandwiches. They're having a little romantic picnic, and I'll just start from there. The Institute's bell began to toll, the deep, loud heartbeat of the apex of the night. Jace set his knife down. It was a neat little pocket knife, bone-handled, that Alec had given him when they became Parabata. He'd used it constantly, and the grip was worn smooth from the pressure of his fingers. Midnight, he said. He could feel Clary beside him, sitting back among the remains of their picnic, her breathing soft in the cool air of the greenhouse. He didn't look at her. He looked straight ahead, at the shining closed buds of the Medianox plant. He wasn't sure why he didn't want to look at her. He remembered the first time he had ever seen the flower bloom here in the greenhouse, sitting on a stone bench with Alec and Izzy on either side of him, and Hodge's fingers on the stem of the blossom. The tutor had woken him up at nearly midnight to show them the marvel, a plant that normally grew only in Idris, and he remembered his breath catching in the wintry midnight air at the sight of something so surprising and so beautiful. Alec and Isabel had not been caught up by the beauty of it, as he had been. Isabel was bored the moment she found out that the flower had only medicinal uses and not lethal ones. And Alec, who was never a night person, had fallen asleep on top of Isabel. Jace was worried even now, as the bells rang on, that Clary would be the same, interested, maybe pleased, but not enchanted. He wanted her to feel the same way he had about the plant. He could not have said why. A sound escaped her lips. A soft, oh. The flower was blooming, opening like the birth of a star, all shimmering pollen and white gold petals. Did they bloom every night? She said. A wave of relief went through him. Her eyes were shining, fixed on it. She was flexing her fingers unconsciously, the way he had come to understand she did when she was wishing she had a pen or pencils to capture the image of something in front of her. Sometimes he wished he could see the same way she did, see the world as a canvas to be captured in paint or chalk or watercolor. And sometimes, when she looked at him that way, as if she was taking him apart, bits and pieces to be separated out and painted or sketched, an almost emotionless analysis, he found himself on the verge of blushing, a feeling so strange he didn't recognize it. Jace Wayland did not blush. Happy birthday, Clary Frey, he said, and his mouth curved into a smile. I have something for you. He fumbled a little, reaching into his pocket, though he didn't think she noticed. When he pressed the runestone into her hand, he was conscious of how small her fingers were, delicate but strong, calloused from hours of holding pencils and paintbrushes. He wondered if contact with his skin sped up her pulse, the way it did for him when he touched her. Apparently not, because she drew away from him, her expression showing only curiosity. You know, when most girls say they want a big rock, they don't mean, you know, literally a big rock. He smiled without meaning to, which was unusual in and of itself. Usually only Alec or Isabel could startle laughter out of him. He had known Clary was brave the first time he met her, walking into that room after Isabel, unarmed and unprepared and unapologetic. Took the kind of guts he didn't associate with mundanes. But the fact that she made him laugh was surprising. It's not a rock, he said. All shadow hunters have a witchlight runestone. It brings you light, even among the darkest shadows of this world, and others. They were the same words his father had spoken to him upon giving him his first runestone. What other worlds? Jace had asked, but his father only laughed. There are more worlds a breath away from this one than there were grains of sand on a beach, he said. Sometimes Jace wondered if there were other Jaces in those world versions of him, and if so, whether their fathers and mothers were alive or dead, whether they were happy or sad, and whether they wondered about him. Claire smiled at him and made a joke about birthday presents, but he sensed that she was genuinely touched. She slid the stone into her pocket carefully. The flower was already shedding petals like illuminated rain, lighting her face with a soft glow. When I was 12, I wanted a tattoo, she said. A strand of red hair fell across her eyes. Most shadow hunters get their first marks at 12, he said. It must have been in your blood. Maybe. Although I doubt most shadow hunters get a tattoo of Donatello from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on their lip. She smiled in that way she did when she said things that were totally inexplicable to him, as if she was fondly remembering. It sent a twinge sparking through his veins, a sort of fear, but he wasn't sure what he was afraid of. The mundane world itself that she would one day return to, leaving him and his universe of demons and hunters, stars and battle gratefully behind. He cleared his throat. You wanted a turtle on your shoulder? She nodded, and her hair fell back into place. I needed to cover up my chickenpox scar. She drew the strap of her tank top aside. See? Yeah, he saw. There was some sort of mark on her shoulder, a scar. But he saw more than that. He saw the curve of her collarbone, the light dusting of freckles on her skin, like a dusting of gold, the curve of her shoulder, the pulse at the base of her throat. He saw the shape of her mouth, her lips slightly parted, her lashes as she lowered them. And he was swept through with a wave of desire, a kind he had never experienced before. He'd desired girls before, certainly. He satisfied that desire. He had always thought of it as a hunger, a need for sort of fuel, that the body wanted, like food. But he had never felt it like this, a clean fire that burned away the thought. It made his hands not tremble exactly, but thrum with nervous energy. He tore his eyes away from her before they could show too much. It's getting late, he said. We should go back downstairs. She looked at him curiously, and he couldn't help the feeling that those green eyes could see right through him. Have you and Isabel ever dated, she said. He stared at her. Isabel? He echoed. Isabel? What did Isabel have to do with anything? Simon was wondering, she said, and he hated the way she said Simon's name. Jace had never felt anything like that before, anything that unnerved him like Clary did. He remembered her in the alleyway behind the coffee shop, the way he had wanted to draw her outside, away from the dark-haired boy she was always with, into his world of shadows. He had felt even then that she belonged where he did, not to the mundane world where people weren't real, where they passed just beyond his visions like puppets on a stage. But this girl, with her eyes that pinned him like a butterfly, she was real, like a voice you could hear in a dream that you know comes from the waking world. She pierced the distance he had set so carefully about himself, like a moat around a castle. The answer is no, he said. I mean, there may have been a time when the one or the other of us considered it, but she's almost a sister to me. It would be strange. You mean Isabel and you never? No, never, he said. She hates me, said Clary. Despite everything, Jace almost laughed. Like a brother might, he took a certain delight in observing Isabel when she was frustrated. You just make her nervous, because she's always been the only girl in a crowd of boys, and now she isn't anymore. But she's so beautiful, said Clary. So are you, said Jace, automatically, and saw her expression change. He couldn't read her face. It was hardly as if he had never told a girl she was beautiful before, but he couldn't remember a time it wasn't calculated, that it was accidental, that it made him feel like going to the training room and throwing knives and kicking and punching and fighting shadows until he was bloody and exhausted. She just looked at him quietly. Well, the training room it was, then. We should probably go downstairs, he said. All right. He couldn't tell what she was thinking from her voice. His ability to read people seemed to have deserted him, and he didn't really understand why. Moonlight speared down through the glass panes of the greenhouse as they made their way out. Clary slightly in front of him. Something moved ahead of them, a white spark of light, and she stopped short and half turned to him, already in the circle of his arm. And then he was kissing her. He was astonished. He didn't work like this. His body didn't do things without his permission. It was his instrument as much as the piano, and he had always been in perfect command of it. But she tasted sweet, like apples and sugar, and her body in his arms was trembling. She was so small. His arms went around her to steady her. He understood suddenly why kisses in movies were filmed the way they were, with the camera endlessly circling and circling. The ground was unsteady under his feet, and he clung to her, small as she was, as if she could hold him up. His hands smoothed down her back. He could feel her breathing against him. Her thin fingers were in his hair on the back of his neck, tangling gently, and he remembered the flower and the first time he saw it, and thought, here longer something too beautiful to properly belong in the world. The rush of wind was audible to him first, trained as he was to hear it. He drew back from Clary and saw Hugo, who was a bird, if you don't remember, perched in the crook of a nearby dwarf cypress. Jace's arms were still around Clary, her slight weight against him. Don't panic, but we've got an audience, he said to her. If Hugo's here, Hodge won't be far behind. We should go. Her eyes fluttered all the way open, and she looked amused. It prickled his ego slightly. After that kiss, shouldn't she be fainting? She was grinning. She wondered if Hodge was spying on them. He reassured her that he felt her laughter travel through their joined hands. But how did that happen? As they made their way downstairs. And he understood why people held hands. He'd always thought it was about possessiveness, saying, this is mine. But it wasn't. It was about maintaining contact. It was about, I want you with me, and don't go. He wanted her in his bedroom. But not in that way. No girl had ever been in his bedroom that way. It was his private space, his sanctuary. No one came in there but Alec or Isabel. But he wanted Clary there. He wanted her to see him, the reality of him, not the image he showed the world. He wanted to lie down on the bed with her and have her curl against him. He wanted to hold her as she breathed through the night, to see her as no one else saw her, to see her and be seen. So when they reached her door and she thanked him for the picnic, he still didn't let go of her hand. Are you going to sleep? He asked. She tilted her head up. Aren't you tired? There was a hollowness in the pit of his stomach, a nervous edginess. I've never been more awake. She lifted her chin, a quick unconscious movement, and he leaned down, cupping her face with his free hand. He didn't mean to kiss her, too public, too easy to be interrupted. But he couldn't stop himself. Her lips parted under his, and he leaned into her, and he couldn't stop himself, and it was precisely that moment that Simon threw open the bedroom door and stepped out in the hall. And Clary pulled away from Jace hastily, turning her head aside, and he felt it with the sharp pain of a bandage ripped off his skin. Simon was saying something, a jumble of angry words, and Jace thought of all the times he'd been in this situation before. Kissing some girl, maybe in an alley behind a bar, or pressed up against the wall of a club, and her boyfriend, or the poor guy who thought he had a chance, staring at them like someone had just reached into his chest and ripped out his heart. Jace always felt sorry for that guy, but in a distant sort of way, like that guy was a character in a play, acting out being heartbroken. Now, looking at Simon, he realized he'd never feel that way again, because the way Clary was looking at Simon, her whole attention caught up by him, her regret playing on her face, made him realize Simon wasn't the guy in the play who was about to get his heart shattered into pieces. He was. Aww.